In 2016, FIFA's annual revenue was $502 million. By 2025, it had grown to $2.66 billion. This year, because of one tournament, it will cross $9 billion. One man did that. He runs a non-profit sports organization that's over a century old. He didn't launch a product or build a company from scratch. What he did was rewrite who pays and who gets paid. This is the story of how the World Cup became the most profitable event FIFA has ever run, and why the cities hosting it are the ones paying for that success. To understand how we got here, go back to February 2016. FIFA was in crisis. Its previous president, Sepp Blatter, had just been forced out in the middle of a sweeping corruption scandal that saw FIFA officials indicted by the United States Department of Justice on racketeering charges. The organization's reputation was in ruins. Into that vacuum stepped a Swiss-Italian lawyer who had spent over a decade working inside European football's governing body. His name was Gianni Infantino. In his acceptance speech, he made soccer leaders a promise. He told them FIFA would restore its image and its respect. He vowed to put football back at the center of the stage. A decade later, by every financial measure, he has delivered on that promise. FIFA's revenue has grown nearly 18 times over since he took office. The question this video answers is simple. Where did that money actually come from, and where did it actually go? For nearly a century, the World Cup worked a certain way. A local organizing committee and the host country ran the tournament. They took on the risk, they covered many of the costs, and in exchange, they shared in the financial upside. The 2026 World Cup broke that model completely. For the first time in World Cup history, FIFA is operating the tournament itself, dealing directly with host cities instead of through national organizing committees. Under this arrangement, FIFA controls essentially all of the revenue: ticket sales, broadcasting rights, sponsorships, hospitality, merchandise. All of it flows to one place. The host cities control the costs, security, transportation, stadium retrofits, public administration, none of which is optional and none of which is cheap. One sports economist who has studied these events for nearly 3 decades put it bluntly. None of the host cities will benefit financially from the World Cup because they don't get the revenue. They get the costs, which can run well over $100 million per city. Another economist described the entire structure as a franchise model. The host cities are the franchisees. They pay to operate the business. FIFA is the franchisor. It keeps the receipts. New York City's own independently elected financial watchdog ran the numbers on what hosting World Cup matches would actually mean for the city's books. Even under FIFA's own optimistic projection of over 1 million regional visitors, the city's chief financial officer found that the additional tax revenue flowing back to New York would fall well short of covering what the city is expected to spend. This is not a fringe complaint from an outside critic. This is the city's own elected comptroller, the person whose entire job is to track exactly where public money goes. Looking at FIFA's promises and concluding the math doesn't support them. This pattern isn't new, and it isn't unique to 2026. Researchers built a database of dozens of Olympics and World Cups stretching back to the 1960s. They found that costs beat revenue in more than 4 out of every 5 of these events. The average financial return on the money host cities spent was deeply negative. The hoped-for tourism boost often doesn't fully show up either. Visiting fans do spend money, but regular tourists and even some local residents tend to stay away entirely to avoid the crowds, the traffic, and the inflated prices. In Qatar in 2022, the cheapest available World Cup tickets cost $55. For 2026, comparable seats in the most widely available pricing categories jumped nearly tenfold to $560. This is the first World Cup in history where FIFA took direct control of ticketing rather than handing it to local organizers. And it's the first time FIFA introduced dynamic pricing, the same model airlines and concert promoters use, where prices float upward in real time based on demand. One sports economist explained why this incentive makes sense from FIFA's side, even if it doesn't feel fair from the fans' side. A local sports team needs its supporters to come back next season, so it has a long-term reason to keep prices reasonable. FIFA does not have that same incentive. The World Cup doesn't need repeat customers next year. It needs maximum revenue this summer. When asked directly whether FIFA profits from one specific controversial decision, adding mandatory mid-match hydration breaks, which conveniently align with commercial broadcast windows, Infantino said this: that broadcasters might generate more from it. He didn't know. That's great for them, but for FIFA, in his words, they make zero additional revenue. A university soccer finance lecturer called that explanation an insult. He pointed out that during the tournament, a match official had already told a referee play couldn't resume yet because the broadcaster hadn't finished airing its commercials. FIFA, in his words, takes everyone for fools. None of what you just heard is illegal. Not the pricing, not the structure, not the contracts host cities signed willingly, with their eyes open, betting that the exposure and the excitement would be worth the cost. FIFA is a private, non-profit organization under Swiss law. It is legally entitled to negotiate whatever terms host countries are willing to accept, and dozens of cities across 3 countries agreed to these terms anyway. That's actually the most important part of this story. Nobody forced these cities to bid for this. They competed for the right to spend hundreds of millions of dollars hosting a handful of football matches. Because the promise of global attention, tourism, and prestige is genuinely powerful, even when the independent research says the financial math rarely works out. Infantino's revenue numbers are real. FIFA's growth under his leadership is real. The World Cup happening across 16 cities this summer is, by almost every measure, the biggest version of this tournament that has ever existed. The promise he made in 2016, more money for the game, came true. He just never specified who would be paying for it. Somewhere in a city you live near, or one you'll visit this summer, a stadium is being prepared for a match that will be watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world. The broadcasters will make money. The sponsors will make money. FIFA will make more money this year than in any year in its history. And the city covering the bill will be told, next year, that it was worth it for the exposure. Based on the numbers, exposure is the only thing host cities are guaranteed to get.